The ship that carried humanity's hope across the stars was not beautiful. It was a thing of welded steel and bolted plates, held together by engineering that the galaxy's elder races would have called primitive. Exhaust trails followed it like smoke from a dying fire, and its engines groaned with every jump through hyperspace. But inside that ugly vessel sat 12 human beings who carried the dreams of 8 billion souls back on. Earth Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the viewport and watched as the great station of Velith Prime grew larger. It was a masterpiece of alien engineering, a spinning ring of crystalline towers and floating platforms that orbited a world of purple oceans. Ships of every design moved around it like fish around a reef. Sleek and silent and powerful, Elena looked back at her own ship and felt a moment of doubt. Then she straightened her shoulders and reminded herself why they had come. Humanity had discovered faster than light travel only 30 years ago. In that time, they had built exactly 4 starships capable of leaving the solar system. This one, the Unity, was the best of them. It had taken everything Earth had to build it. Every nation contributing resources and talent to create something that could carry their voice to the stars, and now that voice would finally be heard. The docking procedure took 3 hours because the station systems could barely recognize the Unity as a spacecraft. When the airlock finally opened, Elena led her delegation into a corridor of gleaming white walls and soft blue light. Alien beings moved past them without a second glance. Creatures of scales and feathers and photoluminescent skin. A floating drone guided them to the grand assembly hall. Elena had seen images of this place transmitted back to Earth by long-range probes, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of standing in a chamber that held representatives from over 200 spacefaring civilizations. The ceiling stretched so high it disappeared into artificial clouds. Platforms floated at different levels, each one holding delegations from different species, and every single eye and sensor and receptor in that vast space turned to look at the humans as they entered. The laughter started almost immediately. It began with the Valoran, a species of tall reptilian beings who controlled 17 star systems and had been conquering worlds for 10,000 years. Their ambassador, a female named Kethra, whose scales shimmered like polished emeralds, made no effort to hide her amusement. Is this truly the species that requested membership in the Concord? She asked, her voice carrying across the hall through translation devices. They smell of chemical rockets and fossil fuels. The Scythic delegation clicked their mandibles in agreement. They were insectoid beings with compound eyes that reflected the light like clusters of rubies. Our larvae built better ships as toys, one of them said. Perhaps we should offer them some. More laughter rippled through the assembly. The Oravani, beings of living light contained in crystalline shells, dimmed their glow in what Elena had learned was their equivalent of rolling their eyes. Even species she had never seen before joined in the mockery. Elena stood perfectly still. Her delegation stood with her, their faces carefully blank. They had prepared for this possibility. Earth's intelligence agencies had intercepted enough alien communications to know how the elder races viewed younger species, but preparation and experience were different. Things honored members of the Galactic Concord, Elena said when the laughter finally faded. Humanity comes before you in peace and friendship. We seek membership in your great assembly. We offer our world's resources, our people's labor, and our civilization's creativity in exchange for the benefits of galactic cooperation. How delightful, Kethra said, rising from her platform to address the assembly. The primitive apes wish to join our ranks. Tell me, human, what exactly does your species offer that we do not already possess in abundance? Elena had prepared an answer for this question. She spoke of Earth's biodiversity, its unique art and music, its philosophical traditions, its scientific creativity. She spoke of humanity's resilience and adaptability, their ability to thrive in conditions that would kill other species. She spoke with passion and precision, every word chosen to appeal to the values the Concorde claimed to uphold. When she finished, the hall was silent for a long moment. Then Kethra laughed again. And the sound was cruel. You offer us stories and songs while you travel in ships held together by hope and metal tape. The Concorde has no need for poets who cannot even master basic gravitational engineering. The High Arbiter, a being of pure energy contained in a hovering geometric shell, spoke for the first time. The request for membership is denied. It said in a voice like wind chimes in a storm. Earth has not achieved the minimum technological threshold for consideration. Return when you have something worth offering. Elena felt her delegation tense behind her. One of her aides, a young man named Chun, stepped forward to protest. But Elena raised her hand to stop him. Very well, she said, her voice steady despite the humiliation burning in her chest. If membership is not possible, perhaps the Concorde would consider trade agreements. Earth has materials and goods that might interest individual species, even if our technology does not impress the assembly. The Arbiter's geometric form pulsed with what might have been irritation. Trade agreements require approved membership or provisional status. Neither has been granted. Then defensive treaties. Elena pressed. The galaxy is dangerous. Surely the Concorde provides protection for developing species against. Protection is earned, Kethra interrupted. Not given to every primitive civilization that stumbles into space. If humanity cannot protect itself, perhaps humanity should not have left its little blue world. The laughter returned. Louder than before, Elena looked around the assembly hall at the hundreds of alien faces, all of them amused by humanity's failure. She saw no sympathy, no kindness, no recognition of their courage in coming so far. She saw only contempt. For a long moment she simply stood there, letting the mockery wash over her. Then she gathered her documents, straightened her spine, and spoke 6 words that would echo through history. You will remember this day. No one took it as a threat. The Valoran laughed harder. The Scythic clicked with amusement. The Uravani flickered dismissively. They watched the human delegation walk out of the assembly hall and return to their ugly, primitive ship. They watched the Unity undock from the station and engage its crude engines. They watched it jump into hyperspace, trailing exhaust like tears, and then they forgot about humanity entirely. That was their first mistake. It would not be their last. 50 years is a long time for a human being. It is nothing to a galaxy. The Concorde continued as it always had. The elder races playing their games of politics and war while younger species struggled to survive. The Valoran hegemony expanded its borders, conquering 3 new star systems and enslaving their populations. The Scythic warred with the Uravani over mining rights in the Keth Nebula. The High Arbiter mediated disputes and collected tribute and maintained the illusion of galactic order, and Earth went silent at first. No one noticed. The humans had been so insignificant, so easily dismissed, that their absence created no ripple in galactic affairs. A few scholars mentioned that communications from Sol System had ceased, but their observations were filed away and forgotten after 10 years. A Scythic merchant vessel passed through the region on its way to a distant colony. Its captain noted something strange in her log. The energy readings from Earth's solar system were far higher than they should have been. She reported this anomaly to her superiors, who reported it to the Concorde Science Division, who added it to a database that no one ever checked after 20 years. The Valoran sent a scout ship to investigate. It never returned. The hegemony assumed It had been destroyed by a navigational error, or perhaps pirates operating in uncharted space. They sent no second ship. They had better things to worry about after 30 years. Long-range sensors detected something impossible. Earth's moon had gone dark. Not dark as in unlit, but dark as in invisible, for 3 standard days. The largest natural satellite in the Sol system simply vanished from all detection methods when it reappeared. Its mass had changed something, had hollowed out a significant portion of the lunar core. The Concord Science Division flagged this as an anomaly worth investigating. The High Arbiter reviewed the report and decided that whatever was happening on Earth was not a threat to galactic civilization. The humans had probably destroyed themselves with some primitive experiment. It was the kind of thing young species did when they reached too far too fast. Let them be a cautionary tale for others. After 40 years, a pattern became clear to anyone paying attention. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter was disappearing, not quickly, not dramatically, but steadily, rock by rock, mineral by mineral. The vast ring of debris that had circled humanity's sun for billions of years was being consumed. Converted used a Valoran admiral named Lexar presented a report to her government suggesting that Earth might be building something of significant scale. She recommended sending a fleet to investigate and, if necessary, eliminate any potential threat before it could develop. Her superiors laughed at her. The humans? One of them said, his scales rippling with amusement. They could barely build ships when they came begging to the Concord. What could they possibly construct that would threaten us? Dexara argued her case. She pointed to the energy readings, the vanishing asteroids, the silent communications. She spoke of a species that had developed nuclear weapons within decades of discovering electricity, that had landed on their own moon before they had even mapped their own oceans. These are not ordinary primitives, she warned. They advance at a rate that defies historical patterns. If we wait too long, we may regret it. Her superiors removed her from command and assigned her to a remote outpost where her paranoid theories would not disturb the hegemon's more important concerns. Dexara spent the next 10 years watching the stars and waiting for something terrible to arrive. She was right to be afraid on Earth. Humanity was not collapsing. Humanity was transforming. The humiliation at Velith Prime had united the species in a way that nothing else could have. Every nation, every culture, every political faction had watched the recording of Ambassador Vasquez being laughed out of the Galactic Assembly. They had seen the contempt in alien eyes, heard the mockery in alien voices, and they had decided, together, that it would never happen again. The governments of Earth formed a united council. For the first time in human history, resources that had been hoarded by nations were pooled into a common fund. Scientists who had been competing against each other began collaborating on a scale never before attempted, and the greatest minds humanity had ever produced turned their attention to a single question. How do we ensure our survival in a galaxy that wants us to fail? The answer required sacrifice. It required patience. It required a level of secrecy that would have been impossible before the digital age. Earth stopped communicating with the outside galaxy because every transmission could be intercepted and analyzed. They dismantled their primitive starships and used the materials for more important projects. They turned inward, silent and focused, like a predator gathering strength before a hunt. The moon was hollowed out and converted into the largest shipyard in human history. Mars was terraformed not for habitation but for industry, its entire surface becoming a factory world that worked without rest. The asteroid belt was harvested for raw materials, every rock processed and refined and transformed into something new. And in the dark spaces between worlds, where no alien sensor could reach, Humanity built its fleet, not ships, held together by hope and metal tape, not vessels that trailed exhaust like wounded animals. These were weapons of a different order. Entirely human scientists had cracked the secrets of gravitational manipulation. Within a decade of returning from Velith Prime, they had mastered faster than light communication 5 years after that. By the 40th year of silence, they had developed energy projection systems that could crack a planet's crust from orbital distance. By the 50th year, they had built 10,000 warships, each one capable of destroying anything the Galactic Concord could field against it. Elena Vasquez did not live to see her promise fulfilled. She died in her sleep at the age of 93, surrounded by grandchildren who had grown up in a world united by purpose. But her words were carved into the hull of every ship in the Earth Armada. You will remember this day. The galaxy was about to learn what those words meant. The silence was about to end. The Battle of Karath Nebula was supposed to be a simple conquest. The Valoran hegemony had sent 3,000 warships to crush a Scythic colony world that had refused to pay tribute. Admiral Kethra commanded the fleet from her flagship, the Eternal Dominion, a vessel so massive that it generated its own gravitational field. She had risen far since the day she mocked humanity in the Grand Assembly. Now she was the most feared military commander in the hegemony, responsible for the conquest of 6 star systems and the deaths of billions. The Scythic colony had no real defenses. Their orbital stations were designed for trade, not war. Their population of 12 million civilians huddled in underground shelters, waiting for death to fall from the sky. Kethra gave the order to begin bombardment. She felt no guilt. The weak existed to serve the strong. This was the natural order of the galaxy. The truth that the Concord pretended to ignore but secretly accepted. Her weapons officers reported targets locked her. Tactical displays showed the helpless colony spread beneath her fleet like a sacrifice on an altar. And then the stars began to go out. Kethra noticed it first on her peripheral sensors. The distant points of light that had burned for billions of years were vanishing one by one, as if something enormous was passing in front of them. She ordered her officers to explain what was happening. They could not. The sensor data made no sense. Objects were approaching from the darkness between stars, but their size was impossible. Each contact dwarfed the Eternal Dominion the way a mountain dwarfs a pebble. There were hundreds of them, then thousands. Then the number exceeded what the Valoran sensors could calculate. What is this? Kethra demanded, her voice cracking for the first time in decades. Her communications officer turned to face her with terror in his reptilian eyes. Admiral, we are receiving a transmission. It is being broadcast on all frequencies simultaneously in every known language. That is impossible, Kethra said. Play it. The voice that filled the bridge was calm and cold and utterly human. This is the United Earth Armada. The Scythic colony world designated Karath 7 is now under our protection. All Valoran vessels will withdraw from this system immediately. You have 60 seconds to comply. Failure to comply will result in the destruction of your fleet. This is your only warning. The bridge fell silent. Every officer stared at their admiral, waiting for orders. Kethra felt something she had not experienced since she was a hatchling. Fear. But fear was weakness, and weakness was death. She bared her teeth in a snarl and slammed her fist against her command console. Humans. She spat the word like a curse. They dare threaten the Valoran hegemony? They are bluffing. One primitive species cannot build ships of that size. Signal the fleet to continue bombardment. We will deal with these pretenders after we finish our business here. Her weapons officer hesitated. Admiral, the energy readings from those vessels are unlike anything in our databases. If their weapons are proportional to their size, I gave you an order. Kethra interrupted. Fire on the colony. Now. The weapons officer obeyed. Plasma beams lanced down toward the defenseless world below. They never reached their target. A barrier of golden light appeared between the Valoran fleet and the planet. A shield of impossible dimensions that absorbed every beam without visible effect. The human voice spoke again. 47 seconds remaining. Kethra felt her scales go cold. She looked at her tactical display and saw that the human ships had moved into attack position without any of her sensors detecting thrust emissions. They simply appeared where they wanted to be. As if the laws of physics were suggestions they had chosen to ignore. Target the nearest human vessel, she ordered. Her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her hearts. All 4 batteries. Fire. The Eternal Dominion was the most powerful warship in the Valoran fleet. Its weapons could crack a moon in half. Every 4 battery fired at once. A storm of plasma and kinetic rounds and antimatter missiles that should have reduced any target to vapor. The human ship did not even attempt to evade. It simply hung there in the darkness, letting the barrage wash over it like rain on stone. When the light faded, there was no visible damage, not a scratch on the black hole that seemed to drink in the light of distant stars. 30 seconds remaining. Kethra's communications officer spoke in a trembling voice. Admiral, ships throughout the fleet are breaking formation. Several captains are reporting they intend to withdraw. They cannot. Kethra snarled. But she knew it was already over. She could see it in the eyes of her officers. The same terror she felt reflected back at her. They had been predators their entire lives. Now they understood what it meant to be prey. 20 seconds remaining. A single beam of light emerged from the nearest human ship. It was beautiful in its simplicity. A lance of pure white energy that crossed the void faster than thought. It touched the Eternal Dominion sister ship, the Crimson Throne. There was no explosion, no debris, no survivors. The Crimson Throne simply ceased to exist, converted instantly to energy and scattered across the void like dust in wind. 70,000 Valoran lives ended in less than a heartbeat. 10 seconds remaining. Kethra made her decision. Pride was important, but survival was everything. All ships, she commanded, her voice barely a whisper. Retreat. Maximum speed. Now, the Valoran fleet fled. 3,000 warships that had come to conquer turned and ran like frightened animals, their engines burning at dangerous levels as they raced to reach the hyperspace threshold. They made it with 2 seconds to spare as her ship jumped into the safety of faster-than-light travel. Kethra looked back at the tactical display. The human vessels had not pursued. They simply remained in position around the Scythic colony. A wall of darkness between the stars, and she remembered a human woman standing in the Grand Assembly 50 years ago. Enduring mockery with quiet dignity, she remembered 6 words spoken without anger or fear. You will remember this day. Now she understood. Now the entire galaxy would understand humanity had returned, and they had brought something with them that the elder races had forgotten could exist. Consequences. News of the Battle of Korath Nebula spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within hours, every species in the Concord had seen the recordings. They watched the Valoran fleet darken the sky above a helpless colony. They watched the stars go out as something vast approached. They watched the most powerful warship in the hegemony fire everything it had at a human vessel and fail to leave a single mark. They watched the Crimson Throne simply stop existing, and they remembered. The primitive species they had laughed at 50 years ago. The Grand Assembly convened an emergency session on Velith. Prime representatives from every major species crowded into the same hall where humanity had been humiliated, but the mood was very different now. Fear had replaced arrogance. Whispered conversations filled the air with theories and rumors. Some said the humans had made a deal with ancient powers from beyond the galactic rim. Others claimed they had discovered technology left behind by the precursors, the mythical race that had seeded life throughout the stars. A few voices suggested that humanity had simply done what the elder races had forgotten was possible. They had worked together. The High Arbiter called for silence and addressed the assembly. We face a crisis unlike any in Concord history. The geometric being announced. A species we dismissed as primitives has returned with military capabilities that exceed our combined fleets. We must determine how to respond before they decide to respond to us. The debate that followed lasted 3 days. The Valoran demanded immediate military action, arguing that humanity must be destroyed before they grew even stronger. The Civic, grateful for their colony's survival, advocated for diplomacy. The Orovani suggested surrender and hoped that the humans would be merciful. In the end, the Arbiter made the only decision that made sense. They would request an audience with Earth's leadership and hoped that the humans were willing to talk. The message was sent. The response came within minutes. As if the humans had been waiting, we accept. Our representative will arrive at Velith Prime in 1 standard day. Prepare the Grand Assembly for her arrival. The next day, the entire Concord watched as a human ship approached the station. It was not like the Unity that had come 50 years ago. This vessel was a mountain of black metal and golden light. Its hull inscribed with patterns that seemed to move when viewed directly. It dwarfed the orbital stations around Velith Prime. It dwarfed the planet itself. A single shuttle departed from the massive ship and descended to the Grand Assembly Hall. The gathered representatives held their breath as the doors opened. The woman who walked through them was young. By human standards, perhaps 30 years old. She had dark skin and darker eyes, and she moved with the confidence of someone who knew exactly how much power stood behind. Her name was Maya Vasquez. She was the granddaughter of Elena. She approached the central platform where the High Arbiter waited and surveyed the assembled delegates with an expression that revealed nothing. "I am Ambassador Maya Vasquez of the United Earth Government," she said. "I speak for humanity." The Arbiter's geometric form pulsed with nervous energy. "Ambassador Vasquez, the Galactic Concord welcomes you, and I did not come for welcomes." Maya interrupted. "I came because you requested this meeting, and I wish to see if the Concord had learned anything in the past 50 years. Silence fell across the hall. No one had ever interrupted the High Arbiter. No one had ever dared. Maya continued without waiting for a response. "My grandmother stood in this hall half a century ago. She came in peace, offering friendship and cooperation. She asked for nothing that would have cost the Concord anything of significance. And you laughed at her." Her voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the words. "You laughed at her ship because it was not beautiful. You laughed at her species because we had not yet mastered technologies that took you millennia to develop. You laughed at our dreams of partnership as if ambition was something to be mocked." She turned slowly, making eye contact with delegates from every major species. "We came to you as friends, and you taught us that friendship was weakness. We asked for your help, and you taught us that help was never given, only taken. We hoped for acceptance, and you taught us that respect was only shown to those who could demand it. So we went home, and we became something that could demand it." The Arbiter found its voice. "Ambassador, the Concord acknowledges that mistakes were made in the past. We are prepared to offer humanity full membership, favorable trade agreements, and defensive treaties, whatever you require." Maya's smile held no warmth. "We do not require anything from you, Arbiter. That is what you still fail to understand. 50 years ago, we needed the Concord. Today, we do not." A Valoran delegate rose from his platform, his scales flushed with anger. "Then what do you want?" he demanded. "Why save the Scythic colony if not to gain leverage? Why build such a fleet if not to conquer?" Maya turned to face him. "You truly cannot imagine any other reason, can you? Your species has spent 10,000 years conquering the weak because you believe strength existed only to dominate. It never occurred to you that strength could be used to protect. She addressed the entire assembly. Humanity built our fleet because the galaxy taught us that without power, we would be victims. But we did not forget who we were before we came to the stars. We did not forget that once we dreamed of finding friends among the cosmos. We did not forget that the strong can choose to lift up the weak instead of crushing them. Her voice softened slightly. My grandmother died believing that someday humanity would return to this hall. She hoped we would return as conquerors and force you to feel the humiliation she felt. But I knew her, and I know that is not what she truly wanted. What she wanted was for someone to prove her wrong about the galaxy. She wanted to believe that kindness and cooperation were possible, even among the stars. Maya straightened her shoulders. So I offer you a choice. Concord, we do not seek membership in your assembly. We do not need your trade or your treaties. But if you choose to change, if you choose to become the community of equals that you always claim to be, then humanity will stand with you. We will protect the weak from the strong. We will end wars that should never have been fought. We will build something better than what exists today, not as your masters, as your partners. The silence that followed was absolute. No laughter, no mockery, only the weight of a choice that would determine the galaxy's future. The High Arbiter spoke at last. What happens if we refuse? Maya's expression did not change. Then we will do it anyway. The only difference is whether you help or get out of our way. She turned and walked toward the exit at the door. She paused and looked back at the assembly. My grandmother told you that you would remember this day. She was right. Make sure the memory is one worth keeping. Then she was gone, leaving the Concord to wrestle with a future they had never imagined. A future where humanity was no longer asking for permission. The Galactic Concord did not fall. It transformed in the months following Ambassador Vasquez's address to the Grand Assembly. The elder races faced a reality they had never expected. Humanity had offered them a choice, and now they had to decide what kind of galaxy they wanted to live in. The Scythic were the first to accept Earth's partnership. Their colony at Korath 7 had been saved by human intervention when no one else would help them. They understood better than anyone that the Yiv stood better than anyone that the Bestistivist of an intervention when no one else would help them. They understood better than anyone that the old ways had failed. Their ambassador traveled to Earth and signed a treaty of mutual cooperation that became the foundation for everything that followed. The Oravani joined next, their crystalline forms flickering with cautious hope. They had always been philosophers rather than warriors, and they saw in humanity something they had dreamed about for centuries. A species strong enough to enforce peace without being corrupted by power, one by one. The younger races added their voices to the new alliance. Species that had been victims of the elder race's aggression now had protectors. Worlds that had lived in fear could finally breathe. The Valoran hegemony refused to accept the new order. For 10,000 years, they had been the strongest predators in the galaxy. They could not imagine a universe where strength was used for anything other than domination. Admiral Kethra, who had fled from the human fleet at Korath Nebula, led the opposition. She gathered every warship the hegemony possessed and proposed a plan that was desperate and bold. They would strike at Earth itself. If they could destroy the human homeworld, the fleet would be leaderless and disorganized. The galaxy would seethe. Humanity could bleed. The hegemony would reclaim its rightful place at the top of the galactic order. The Valoran assembled 20,000 warships for the attack. It was the largest fleet in their history, representing every vessel they could pull from conquered territories and distant outposts. They traveled in secret, using routes that avoided human patrol zones. They believed surprise would give them the advantage they needed. They were wrong. The Poid human fleet detected them 3 days before they reached Sol System Earth, did not send ships to intercept. Instead, they let the Valoran come Let them see what humanity had built during 50 years of silence. The hegemony fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system and found a fortress. Beyond imagination, Earth's moon had been transformed into a shipyard capable of producing 100 warships per month. Mars bristled with weapons platforms that could target vessels at interplanetary distances. The asteroid belt, once a ring of scattered rocks, was now a trillion autonomous defense stations that moved like a living organism. Jupiter's moons have become military installations, each one armed with weapons that could crack planets, and everywhere, in every orbit, at every station. Human ships waited in numbers that defied counting. Admiral Kethra stared at the tactical display and felt her dreams of victory turn to ash. "This is Admiral Kethra of the Valoran hegemony," she transmitted, her voice hollow. "We request terms for withdrawal." The response came from Earth itself. "You are free to leave." The human commander said, "We will not fire unless you do. But understand this. You came here to destroy our world. We could destroy yours in return. We choose not to. Let that choice define the future between our peoples." The Valoran fleet turned and retreated. 20,000 warships that had come to conquer left without firing a single shot. Not because they had been defeated in battle, but because they had been shown something more frightening than defeat. They had been shown mercy from an enemy who did not need to give it word of the Valoran. Retreat spread across the galaxy faster than light. The hegemony's reputation, built on 10,000 years of conquest, crumbled in a single day. Within a year, their conquered territories began to revolt. Within 5 years, the hegemony had fractured into a dozen smaller states, none of them strong enough to threaten anyone. And through it all, humanity watched and waited. They did not conquer Valoran space. They did not demand tribute or revenge. They simply made it clear that the strong would no longer prey upon the weak without consequence. Decades passed, a new generation rose in the Concord. Children who had grown up knowing humanity as protectors rather than primitives. Trade flourished between species that had once been enemies. Wars became rare, and when they did occur, they ended quickly as human peacekeepers intervened. The galaxy was not perfect. Humanity did not try to make it perfect. They understood that peace could not be forced, only encouraged. That trust had to be earned, not demanded. That true strength meant knowing when not to use it on Velith Prime. In the Grand Assembly Hall, where Elena Vasquez had once been laughed at, a monument was erected. It depicted the old ambassador sitting in silence, her face calm and dignified, while alien figures around her pointed and mocked. Beneath the statue, an inscription was carved in 100 languages. "She heard your mockery and answered with mercy. Remember what humanity could have been, and be grateful for what they chose to become." Maya Vasquez attended the unveiling ceremony. Now an old woman with white hair and eyes that had seen the galaxy transform. She stood before her grandmother's image and wept. Not from sadness, but from a kind of joy she could not put into words. They had done it. Not just built ships and won battles, but changed the meaning of strength itself. The High Arbiter approached her after the ceremony. Its geometric form had changed over the decades, becoming softer somehow. "Less rigid, ambassador," it said. "I have often wondered something about your species. When you returned with your fleet, you could have conquered us all. You could have made the Concord bow to human rule. Why did you choose partnership instead of domination?" Maya smiled, the same smile her grandmother had worn in this very hall so many years ago, because we remembered what it felt like to be laughed at. She said, "We remember being small and frightened and alone, and we decided that no one else should have to feel that way if we could prevent it. Strength without compassion is just cruelty with better weapons. We wanted to be more than that." The Arbiter was silent for a long moment. "Your grandmother would be proud." It finally said. Maya looked up at the statue, at the face of a woman who had endured humiliation with grace and planted seeds that grew into a new galactic order. She always believed the best in people, Maya said, even people who gave her no reason to. I think that was her greatest strength, not the fleet we built or the technology we developed, just the simple faith that kindness was possible, even among the stars. The stars no longer darkened when human warships passed. There was no need. The galaxy had learned to keep its own peace. And in the hall where laughter had once echoed at humanity's expense, the only sound was the quiet hum of species working together, building something better, something Elena Vasquez had dreamed of all those years ago. When she sat in silence and let the mockery wash over her, something worth remembering, the end.